Hi, my name is Merlin, and in 2019 I went on a 3-week road trip through Finland and Norway with 2 friends. Whenever I had been on vacation before, I started missing home. But not in these countries. Our trip started with the arrival at Helsinki after having crossed the Baltic Sea via ferry for 30 hours, coming from Germany. After hours of driving, we decided to set up our camp by a beautiful lake, of which Finland has many. In the Nordic countries you can often find cottages with a fireplace in nature, and luckily there was also one here. It was a nice and relaxing start for our journey. The feeling of making a fire outdoors goes far beyond what a video can capture. But I can tell you that we enjoyed what Finland had to offer us on day 1. And what's even better than making a fire? Cooking on fire. To me there's just something very special about food that was cooked on fire, and so my friends enjoyed their steaks and I enjoyed my fish a lot. Cleaning the dishes in the lake, sitting by the fire with my friends, all those activities slowly but surely made me realize that this adventure that we had dreamt of for weeks had finally begun. A feeling of joy started to get stronger and stronger in my body. And although I already loved it here, I had no idea what else this journey would have to offer me. There's nothing like falling asleep to this sound and waking up to it. I decided to take my first bath ever in a Finnish lake. The water is mostly fresh and clean, and so was this one. Look how clean this water from the lake was that we filtered. Just right for a delicious lentil stew. Since we liked this place so much, we also spent our second night in this cottage. This night was a full moon night. The moonlight on the lake was magical. On the next morning it was finally time to continue our journey and drive further north. Finland has more than 180,000 lakes, so it is no surprise that our next camp would be by a lake again. Or should I say, on a lake. We had spotted an island that we wanted to make a trip to via boat, but to get to the lake we had to cross a swamp area first. Nature at this place was just stunning. Everything looked like it was carefully designed. So clean and perfect. We had brought a boat, but it was not big enough for 3 people, so we had to row to the island twice. And then, while I was waiting for my friend to come back, I really fell in love with this place. There might be thousands of locations like this in Finland, but up to this day, this is still my favorite place in the country. While sitting there, I felt something I can't put into words. I just knew I had arrived. It's been 4 years since then, but I have to think of this place almost every day. Then my friend came back and brought me to the island. This was my first trip to such a kind of island, so I felt like conquering new land that no human had ever touched before. We arrived just in time because it was already evening, so we set up our tents. The location was perfect for camping because the ground was extremely soft due to being covered with moss, raspberry bushes and blueberry bushes. Look what perfect view I had from my tent. Nordic summer nights are pure magic, and so was this one as well. The only problem? Mosquitoes, but that was a small price to pay for what we got in exchange. And as soon as we lit a fire, less of them were around. But the fire was not just for scaring the mosquitoes away. We were hungry, and so it was time to cook some pasta. Italians won't like what I did to the spaghetti, but since I was basically on the other side of Europe, that's okay. Eating outdoors always tastes better, and in such an environment even more. And so, an intense day at a very special place came to an end. I loved waking up on a lonely island in the middle of a lake. Definitely one of the coolest locations that I had ever placed my tent at. After I had taken a short swim in the lake, my friends had brought back the first load of stuff while I had some time to explore the island and found this little toad under a rock. In nature everything is alive and connected, and all objects are homes to some sort of creature. Some of them very big, some of them very small. And they all have to eat, just like us. Basically, we belong to them. And so we were offered plenty food choices as well. After I had enjoyed some of them, my friend came back and it was time to leave the island and my favorite place in all Finland. I have never returned since then, but I would love to. Maybe in the future. We'll see. The little berries on the island were nice to have, but now it was time for some real breakfast. My friend chopped some wood with his axe that looked like it belonged to some undead warrior from a fantasy game. I love such stable wooden furniture, the perfect place for a meal. All of a sudden there were reindeers everywhere. We had driven further north up to Lapland. The first reindeer we saw was very special to us, but a little later we understood that there are many of them running around everywhere. Lapland is reindeer country, although that's a moose on that sign. I'm a big fan of northern Finland. The roads are so empty and everything looks like out of a dream. Often the reindeers don't even care about cars. They just stay completely relaxed while crossing the road. The further north we drove, the cooler the weather got. It almost didn't feel like summer anymore. On one stormy day we were glad that we found a cottage with a fireplace. I cooked a nice lentil stew, which was a lot of fun because we talked so much trash.
Aua. Brauchst ja nicht so geschwollen reden, ich hab hier 5 Pfund Öl in der Hand. Ganz ehrlich, das bringt's jetzt auch nicht mehr. Das können die Leute alle sehen. Hier billig Bier von innerhalb.
Then I put the stew on the fire and also added a banana. I experiment around with food all the time and having a warm banana with some chocolate was simply delicious. This place was rough and comfortable at the same time. It just felt Nordic. So Nordic that I dared to break the spaghettis again. Sorry Italy, I love you nevertheless. On the next morning we drove through a thunderstorm until we found a nice place for what would be our last night in Finland. Of course it was by a lake again, and of course I also took a swim. I love road trips, but I hate being unwashed. In the distance it started to rain again, so it was time to set up the tents. Finland is really a special country to me, and the atmosphere is very unique. I believe there's a spiritual origin for everything material, and so I think that behind every country there's also some sort of spirit that manifests itself in how it feels to be there, how the landscape and the buildings look, how the culture is, the language, and so on. I'm fascinated by the Finnish spirit. Being in nature up there causes a sort of melancholy in me that is beyond positive and negative, a feeling of having completed all worldly tasks and having arrived in a neutral afterworld where my only duty is to exist. And so I mean it in the most neutral way possible when I say, thanks Finland for being my heaven on earth. On the next morning we left heaven and drove over to Norway, a different country but also very beautiful, rough and very spectacular. Our first destination was the North Cape, the northernmost point of mainland Europe, at least almost. There's one point which is even further north, but nevertheless you can basically say that this is the end of mainland Europe. Obviously, from this point on we had to continue our journey by driving south. We ended up at this spectacular spot nearby to set up our camp. Of course, Europe's northernmost area is a rough spot for plants and animals to live, and only a few species survive on the thin layer of soil that covers the cliffs. But isn't it beautiful that life always finds a way, no matter what? Being at this place made me realize how important it is to be in the present moment. It sounds so cliché, but it's true. Because the present moment is all we will ever have. Since the summer nights in the north are very bright, it didn't get any darker than this that night, although it was already August. We woke up to a cold and foggy morning. The atmosphere of this place was completely different than the day before. Mysteriously but uncomfortable. We packed our stuff and left quickly. I liked the tunnels in Norway. They looked like some sort of underground dwarf kingdom. Of course, one thing that Norway is most famous for are the fjords. This one had crystal clear water and some beautiful underwater plants. Looking down into the water was like catching a glimpse into another world. After all that lake swimming, it was also time to jump into the ocean. By the time we set up our camp at this fjord, we had run out of clean clothes, so we washed them in the water. Yes, it was salt water, but only with very low salinity. Of course, we didn't use any detergent. It was fun to do the laundry how our ancestors may have done it. Doing things in a way you're not used to do them can bring variety to your life, and new experiences often create joy. We found this dead crab on the beach. Although I felt sorry for it, I was also fascinated by the opportunity to take a closer look at the animal's body. The eyes, the claws, everything. And we also found this dead jellyfish, which was gigantic, the biggest one I've ever seen. Look at my foot in comparison. Then I cooked some rice, for which I didn't add salt but salty water directly from the sea. Look how beautiful the fire looked at this place. It was an honor to cook there.
Perfekt.
Like so many other evenings, we also ended this one by sitting at a campfire. A few days later we set up our camp in this valley where a crystal clear river was running. The landscape looked like it was shaped by troll hands. Of course, I used the chance to take a swim in the river the next morning. For breakfast I warmed up some lentil stew from the day before, then we continued our journey. Our next goal was one of Europe's highest waterfalls, Mardalsfossen. To get there we had to go on a little hike first, and that's where we came across the clearest water I have ever seen. Look at it, just perfect. Of course I had to take a bath. My second bath in an ice-cold river that day, but it was worth it. At this time of the year the waterfall has only very little water because it is used to produce electricity. I'm very fascinated by water, especially flowing water like rivers and creeks. So I spent some time filming this footage of the beautiful stream carving its way through the landscape, forming little ponds, only to move on the next second. And then we finally reached Mardalsfossen. I had to drink this perfect water. It was pure and full of joy. I wonder what our ancestors thought of such places. This looks like modern design. The further south we drove, the more we became aware that our journey would soon come to an end. This night I slept in the hammock, which I did very rarely on this trip, but the location was not appropriate for a tent. This was my first very cheap outdoor hammock I ever owned, and seeing this footage today makes me smile, but somehow it worked. And like so many times before, I had a good view. It was also one of the rare occasions that I drank a beer. The sky was clear that night. On the next morning my camp was overrun by ants, which was no wonder since a big anthill was in the area. I like these little insects. They live together in big colonies and are very well organized. It was time for the last swim of this journey. Nordic lakes are really something special. Time flies by so quickly, and if I look at these shots today, it's hard to believe that almost 4 years have gone by since we went on this trip. But we can't stop time from running out. Like Gandalf said, we can only decide what to do with it. In Norway, many sheep are roaming free in the countryside, and so we got some very curious visitors. I found it very funny how full of energy they were, but I think my friend was a little worried for his car. But no matter how fun the sheep were, it couldn't hide that we were all a bit sad about the fact that this was our final night in Norway. In a few hours, everything would be over. Setting up the tent for the last time. Taking a last walk in nature. Cooking the last meal. This was it. Driving on the ferry felt wrong, but it just had to be. And so this journey ended and we traveled back to Germany. Although this trip was over, it had started a love for the Nordic countries in me that is still alive today. Thanks for watching.